The crowd outside the courthouse was louder than a storm. Some were screaming in anger, some were crying, and some were just silent, shaking their heads in disbelief. Inside, a man stood with his hands cuffed, tears running down his cheeks. His name was Daniel Reed, a quiet, gentle man with a kind smile, the kind of man who helped old ladies cross the street and rescued kittens from trees. The judge's gavel slammed down. Daniel Reed, for the murder of Officer Kyle Mercer, you are hereby sentenced to death by lethal injection. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. A woman fainted. The prosecutor smirked. Daniel's legs buckled, but he stood tall. He didn't cry out. He didn't beg. He only turned around slowly, looking into the crowd until his eyes found one face, his 16-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily's eyes were filled with fire. Not tears, not fear, not sadness. Fire. As the guards pulled her father away, she mouthed just one word: wait. 3 weeks later, something happened. Something that would change everything. Something no one saw coming. Because what Lily did next was unthinkable. And it started way before that day in court. Daniel Reed wasn't a perfect man, but he was the kind of man you trusted right away. He owned a tiny car repair shop at the edge of town. Everyone knew him as Mr. D. He gave free oil changes to single moms. He let high school boys learn under his hood so they wouldn't get into trouble. He paid for groceries when someone ahead of him couldn't. He lived with his daughter Lily in a modest little house with blue shutters and a rose bush out front. His wife had passed away when Lily was just 6, so Daniel raised her alone. And oh, how he loved her. He packed her lunch every morning and wrote a silly note on a napkin. He watched every single softball game, even when it rained. And when she broke her arm skateboarding, he bought a bright purple cast just so it could match her favorite color. Life wasn't perfect. Bills were always late. Business was slow. But love? Love filled that house like sunlight. That's why what happened next didn't make any sense. One rainy Thursday morning, Daniel was working under the hood of a rusted red truck when police cars suddenly swarmed the shop. Officers jumped out with guns drawn. Daniel Reed. Hands where we can see them. On the ground. Now, Daniel's hands shot up. Tools clattered to the floor. He was handcuffed, shoved into the back of a squad car, and driven away before he even had time to wash the grease off his fingers. Lily came running, still in her pajamas, screaming after the car as it disappeared. At the station, they showed Daniel a photo of Officer Kyle Mercer, shot dead the night before in a parking lot behind a gas station. They showed a security camera still, a tall man with broad shoulders and a ball cap. They said the gun used matched one registered under Daniel's name. They said his fingerprints were on the handle. They said his motive was revenge for a speeding ticket he'd gotten a month ago. Daniel's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He didn't even own a gun anymore. He had sold it 3 years ago after a robbery in town made him feel unsafe, but it had never even left its lockbox before that. I didn't do this, he said again and again. But no one believed him. The trial was fast. Too fast. The jury looked bored. The defense lawyer looked overwhelmed. Lily sat through every day, taking notes in a notebook she wouldn't let anyone see. At night, she cried into her pillow, but only for a moment. Then she would sit up straight, open her laptop, and start researching. Security footage, crime scene reports, gun laws, facial recognition software. Nothing was too hard. She learned everything she could. Because deep down, she knew. Her dad didn't do it. But even knowing that didn't stop the judge from slamming down the gavel and sending him to death row. And that's when Lily changed. She stopped eating lunch at school. She started wearing a hoodie pulled low over her face. She stayed late in the library, then locked herself in her room until 2 a.m. No one knew what she was doing. Her best friend, Ava, begged her to talk. "You can't bring him back, Lily," she whispered once. Lily didn't answer. She just stared ahead and said, "You'll see." Then one day, she disappeared from school altogether. 2 days later, a news story broke. The courthouse servers had been hacked. Files had gone missing. Surveillance footage had been uploaded to an anonymous website. Evidence was being re-examined. A new face appeared in the video footage, a shadowy figure slipping behind the gas station just seconds before the gunshot. No one knew who did it, but Lily did. And that was just the beginning. Lily wasn't the same girl anymore. She had always been smart, always kind, always quiet. But now, she had become something else. Dangerous. That night, she stood in her father's empty room. She touched the framed photo on the nightstand. Her, as a little girl on his shoulders, both laughing. Then she walked to the closet and pulled out a shoebox. Inside it, wrapped in a flannel shirt, was something her dad had hidden years ago. A flash drive. She had found it weeks ago, but hadn't known what it was. Until now. She plugged it into her laptop, and what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Her father had known something. Something big. Something that could destroy people. She stared at the screen, then closed the laptop, and called someone she had promised never to speak to again. The next morning, she was gone. Just as a black van pulled up to her driveway. Just as someone knocked on the door, wearing gloves. Just as the local news announced that the execution date had been moved closer. Her father only had 7 days left. And Lily? Lily had just done something that might save him. Or destroy everything. 3 states away, in a motel that smelled like old coffee and mothballs, Lily sat on a stiff bed with her laptop open and her hands shaking. The flash drive was plugged in. On the screen were folders labeled with strange codes and dates. But one file stood out. It was simply called Mercer. She clicked it. And there he was, Officer Kyle Mercer. Alive. Laughing. Sitting at a table with 2 men Lily didn't recognize. The video was time-stamped just 3 weeks before he was supposedly killed. Lily's heart pounded like a drum. She hit rewind. Watched again. Slower. He was wearing the same jacket that had been described in court. The same badge number. But this wasn't a friendly hangout. One of the other men, bald, with a snake tattoo curling up his neck, slid a thick envelope across the table. Mercer opened it. Counted cash. Lily stared, frozen. Then the video cut to static. She yanked out the flash drive, closed the laptop, and started pacing. He's alive? Was the body someone else? Why fake a death? Who were those men? Why was Dad framed? She needed help. But not from the police. Not from lawyers. And definitely not from the media. She picked up the prepaid burner phone she had bought the night before. Scrolled to a single contact labeled Noah, only if dying. Took a deep breath. And hit call. Noah picked up on the second ring. You swore you'd never call me again, he said. I need you. Silence. Then, where are you? Back in their hometown, chaos was starting to stir. The leaked footage had gone viral. News anchors speculated about new angles and wrongful convictions. Online forums exploded. The courthouse issued a statement that the servers were under maintenance and the footage was likely doctored. But the damage was done. People were starting to question the case. Daniel, still behind bars, heard about the footage from a guard who had once called him the nicest guy in town. The guard slipped him a folded newspaper clipping through the food slot. Daniel read the headline. Breaking. Evidence emerges in Reed case. Execution postponed. His hands trembled. He knew that fire. That determination. That was Lily. He pressed his forehead against the wall and whispered, "What are you doing, baby girl?" Noah showed up 3 hours after the call. He didn't knock. He never did. Just barged into the motel room wearing a wrinkled hoodie and a backpack that clinked when he dropped it. You look like you haven't slept since Christmas, he said. I haven't, Lily replied. She tossed him the flash drive. I think they killed the wrong person. Or faked it. Something's not right. Look, Noah plugged it in. Watched the video silently, chewing the inside of his cheek. When it ended, he looked at her. You know what this means, right? Lily nodded. They framed my dad to hide whatever this is. Worse, they faked an officer's death. That's federal. That's huge. He sat back. You realize they'll come after you next. Lily didn't blink. Let them. Noah gave a dry laugh. You were always scary when you got like this. I'm not scared anymore. Noah shook his head. You should be. He handed her a USB key. Back up everything. Multiple drives. Hide them in places no one would look, like school lockers, public libraries, under trash cans. If they find you, they won't. If they do, and you disappear, this stuff needs to survive. It's bigger than just your dad now. Lily nodded. She'd already thought that far ahead. But she hadn't told Noah about the other file on the drive. Not yet. The one labeled Mayfield Project. That one scared even her. Because it wasn't just names or numbers. It was a list. A kill list. And her father's name had been on it. 6 months before the murder even happened. By the next morning, Lily was on the move again. New disguise. New ID. New town. She'd learned how to hide fast. Tutorials from the dark corners of the internet. Tips from old hacker forums. Everything she could find. She used cash. Switched buses 3 times. left her real phone in a dumpster behind a McDonald's. Her next stop, Mayfield Correctional Facility. Not the prison where her father was. This one was long abandoned, covered in graffiti, broken windows, rotting wood. But it held secrets, and she had a map. Her dad had drawn it once on a napkin while telling her bedtime stories. She thought it was just a silly doodle back then, the hidden kingdom of rusty bones, he'd called it. But now she realized it was a layout of the Mayfield facility, and she needed to see what was buried there. That night, under a cold silver moon, Lily crept through the broken fence of the old prison. Her backpack thumped softly against her back. In one pocket, flashlight. In another, a screwdriver, a pair of gloves, and a can of pepper spray. Just in case. She reached the old laundry building. The door was rusted shut. She wedged it open with the screwdriver and slipped inside. Dust floated like ghosts in the air. Rats scurried. The walls were covered in strange chalk markings, symbols, letters, numbers. Like someone had been down there trying to warn the world. Lily followed her dad's napkin map. Through the corridor. Past the old metal bins. Under a broken pipe. There. A hatch. She pulled it open. And climbed down. Into darkness. Back in town, the district attorney's office was in full panic mode. One of the assistant DAs had just found a printout on his desk. No name. No sender. Just one sentence written across the top in black marker. Check the coroner's report. Mercer never died. Underneath that, 5 pages of medical reports. Lab results. Autopsy inconsistencies. The assistant DA read them twice. Then he picked up the phone and called someone he swore he'd never speak to again. Lily's foot hit the bottom of the metal ladder. She was deep underground now. The air was thick with mold and something else, something sour. She turned on her flashlight and froze. Rows of boxes lined the hidden room, each labeled with codes and names. She stepped closer, opened the first one. Inside were photos, dozens of them, surveillance shots, of people in town, of her dad, of her. She slammed it shut and opened the next one. A black notebook. Inside, page after page of notes. Asset D. Read. Observation begins August 12th. Subject expresses resistance. Recommendation, removal. Frame initiated November 2nd. Cover story in place. Mercer Cooperative. Lily's hands went cold. They planned it. All of it. The murder. The framing. Even Mercer's fake death. She turned to run. And that's when she heard it. A click. Behind her. She spun around. A figure in black stood at the top of the hatch, flashlight beam blinding her. Lily Reed, a cold voice said. You weren't supposed to find this. Lily didn't think. She ran. The hatch above was too far, the figure too fast. So she ducked left, deeper into the underground maze, her flashlight bobbing wildly in her hand. Dust choked the air. Her backpack slammed against her ribs with every step. Footsteps thundered behind her, close. Too close. Whoever it was didn't call out again. They didn't threaten her. They didn't demand the flash drive. They were just chasing her. Quietly. Like a hunter. Lily turned a corner, nearly slipping on a slick patch of wet concrete. Her flashlight caught the edge of a crumbling brick wall, behind which was a narrow opening, barely big enough to squeeze through. She dropped to the ground and scrambled inside. Then everything went dark. She killed the flashlight and held her breath. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. For a moment, it was dead silent. Then tap, tap, tap. The figure's flashlight tapped lightly against the wall right beside her hiding spot. She covered her mouth to muffle her breath. Her heart slammed, so hard it felt like it would crack her ribs. Then the tapping stopped, and the footsteps moved away. 1, 2, 3, gone. Lily waited a full 5 minutes before crawling back out. Her knees were scraped. Her hands were shaking. But her mind was clearer than ever. She had proof now. They'd framed her father. They'd faked a cop's death. And they were still watching her. Which meant, this wasn't just about Daniel Reed anymore. It was about something bigger. Something dangerous. And she needed to get the files out before they found her again. 2 hours later, she was back in a diner 3 towns over. Pretending to sip a coffee she didn't want while her laptop uploaded encrypted copies of the files to a cloud server Noah had built years ago when they used to prank their school's attendance system. Just in case the world ends, he used to say. Lily was starting to think he had a point. She texted him. Upload in progress. Mayfield is real. He texted back instantly. Get out. You're not safe. She was already on her feet. But just as she reached the door, she froze. A man in a suit stood across the street, leaning against a black car, holding a phone to his ear, but his eyes were locked on her. Lily ducked behind a parked truck, yanked off her hoodie, pulled her hair into a bun, and slipped out the alley. She didn't go home. She didn't go to Noah. Instead, she headed for the one person she hadn't spoken to in years. A person her father had once called the only one who knew how to make the devil blink. Across town, in a small, cluttered office filled with dusty books and old case files, retired investigator Sandra Sandy Harper sipped her third cup of black coffee and stared at the letter she had received just yesterday. No return address. No signature. Just a copy of the coroner's report and a note scribbled in pencil. They're lying. And an innocent man is going to die. Find the truth. L.R. Sandy hadn't taken a case in 5 years. She'd seen too many lies, too many crooked deals, too many lives destroyed by men in nice suits with cold hearts. But something about this letter, it stirred the old fire. She'd known Daniel Reed once. Had coffee with him at town hall when he fixed her old Ford for free. He was kind, honest, not a killer. And something about this case didn't sit right with her. So she pulled out the old boxes, started reading, and within hours, she found what no one else had bothered to notice. The time of death, the body temperature, the police call logs. None of it lined up. Someone had tampered with the reports. She picked up her landline, the same one she hadn't used in years, and called someone she hoped still owed her a favor. Back at the diner's alley, Lily's lungs burned as she sprinted to the bus station. She had no bag now, no phone, nothing but the flash drive and a folded paper in her pocket with an address. The address to Sandy Harper's office. She was almost there when the black car reappeared. It screeched into view from a side street, cutting her off. 2 men jumped out. Lily turned to run, but one of them grabbed her by the backpack strap, yanked her back hard. She screamed, kicked, thrashed. People were nearby. A mother with a stroller. A man on his phone. A teenager eating fries. But no one helped. Because the man shouted something that froze them all. FBI. Step back. Lily stopped struggling, confused. FBI? The other man flashed a badge so fast she couldn't see it clearly. They dragged her toward the car. That's when she realized something was wrong. Their badges had no photos. No numbers. No names. Just blanks. And one of them whispered in her ear. You should have kept your mouth shut, kid. Lily twisted violently, elbowed the man in the gut, and ran. Sprinted into traffic. Horns blared. Tires screeched. She darted through cars, lost a shoe, slipped, kept running. They chased her, fast, relentless. But then, just as one reached for her shoulder, an old silver SUV skidded to a stop between them. The door flung open. Get in, a raspy voice shouted. Lily didn't hesitate. She jumped in, and the car peeled off. She turned. There, in the driver's seat, sunglasses perched on her nose and a cigarette dangling from her lips, was Sandy Harper. Didn't think I'd see you again, kid, Sandy said. Lily gasped, still catching her breath. You got my letter? Sandy nodded once. I'm in, she said. Let's burn them down. At the same time, in a secure government building 200 miles away, the man who had once been called Officer Kyle Mercer stood in front of a dark glass window, talking to someone on the other side. They know, he said, voice tight. Then we move up the timeline, came the reply. No more delays. Make sure the girl disappears. Permanently. Mercer nodded, then turned and walked away, disappearing down the hall. Outside, rain began to fall. And Daniel Reed? He only had 5 days left to live. The rain came down hard as Sandy's SUV raced down the highway, windshield wipers slashing back and forth like swords in a storm. Lily sat in the passenger seat, dripping wet, heart still hammering in her chest. She looked over at Sandy, who drove like a woman with nothing left to lose. One hand on the wheel, the other flicking her cigarette out the window. Where are we going? Lily asked. Sandy didn't take her eyes off the road. Somewhere quiet. Where ghosts go to drink coffee and scream into the sky. Lily blinked. What? Sandy grinned. You'll see. They drove in silence for a while, the hum of tires on wet asphalt the only sound. Lily stared at her hands. They were scratched, bruised, and trembling. But not from fear. From anger. She had almost been taken. Again. By people pretending to be FBI. With blank badges and cold voices. And worse, no one around her had helped. No one had even questioned it. They had power. Real power. I think they've done this before, Lily whispered. To other people. Sandy nodded grimly. Oh, they have. These people don't just erase truth. They erase lives. They turned off the highway onto a narrow road that wound through pine trees. A wooden sign read Norton Pines, Pop 213. No stoplights. No fast food joints. Just a gas station, a diner, and a boarded-up schoolhouse. Sandy pulled into a gravel driveway behind a tiny cabin with a rusted roof and a porch swing held up by one chain. You trust this place? Lily asked, eyeing the shadows between the trees. Sandy grunted. I built it myself after I left the force. Nobody knows about it. Not even my ex-husband. Which says a lot. Inside, the cabin was dusty but cozy. Bookshelves lined the walls, a fireplace in the corner, and an ancient coffee pot burbling on the stove. Sandy tossed Lily a dry towel and a flannel shirt. Get warm. Then we talk. Lily changed, wrapped the towel around her shoulders, and sat cross-legged on the couch. She pulled out the flash drive. I haven't even gone through all of it yet, she said. But there's something called the Mayfield Project. My dad's name was on a list, months before Mercer's death. Sandy raised an eyebrow. Mayfield Project? Sounds like government code. Probably black ops or something buried under 10 layers of lies. Lily nodded. There's also surveillance photos. Of people in town. Of me. Sandy poured 2 mugs of steaming black coffee. We need to go through every file. Piece together the timeline. Figure out who's behind this and why they chose your dad. Lily hesitated. What if it's too late? What if I can't stop it in time? Sandy looked at her, eyes sharp. Then we expose them anyway. Not just to save your father, but for every person they've ever buried with lies. Lily's fists clenched. Then we'd better start digging. Across the country, in a steel-gray office lit by buzzing fluorescent lights, a man in a military-style jacket stared at a red folder labeled Asset Control. Lily read. He flipped it open. Inside, school records, medical files, therapy notes, surveillance images, GPS data. She's smarter than we thought, he muttered. Another agent stood nearby. What do we do if Harper's helping her? Then we erase them both. Back at the cabin, Lily and Sandy pored over the files late into the night. Dozens of folders, hundreds of documents. Each one worse than the last. The Mayfield Project wasn't just surveillance. It was selection. People were being chosen. Ordinary people. Mechanics, teachers, journalists, librarians. Each person marked with a risk level. Notes like, influential in community. Could cause unrest. Potential whistleblower. And beside Daniel Reed's name. Unpredictable. Refuse cooperation. Target for neutralization. Lily stared at the screen. They tried to recruit him. Sandy nodded slowly. And when he said no, they framed him. Lily finished, voice like ice. Then she found another file. This one encrypted. She typed furiously, trying passwords, code phrases, combinations. Nothing worked. Until she remembered something. Her dad used to whisper it to her before bed, every night, since she was 5. You're my hero, Bug. She typed it in. The folder opened. And inside was a video. Her father, sitting in his shop, talking to someone off camera. Look, I told you, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't care what you're planning, covert ops, inside jobs, whatever. I'm a mechanic. I fix cars. I'm not gonna be your cover story. A voice responded. It was distorted. You already are. Then the screen went black. Lily's throat tightened. Sandy's face darkened. They set him up the minute he refused. That's when the cabin lights flickered, then went out. Sandy jumped to her feet. Don't move, she whispered, reaching under the couch and pulling out a handgun. Lily ducked behind the table. They found us. A sound, gravel crunching outside. 2, no, 3 sets of footsteps. Sandy crouched by the window, peering through the blinds. Men in black. No badges. No headlights. They're here for you. Lily's chest tightened. We have to get out. Back exit. Quiet. They crept to the rear door, Sandy leading with the gun drawn. Outside, the forest was pitch black, rain still trickling from the trees. Then, crash. The front door burst open. Boots stomped in. A voice barked, sweep it. Grab the girl. Take out Harper if she resists. Lily froze. They weren't trying to scare her. They were going to take her. For good. Sandy grabbed her hand. Run. They tore into the woods. Branches whipped Lily's face. Her lungs burned. Behind them, flashlights bobbed. Voices shouted. One flashlight beam caught Lily's shoulder. A shot rang out. Sandy pulled her down just in time. They rolled behind a fallen log. Sandy handed Lily the flash drive. "If I don't make it, get this to someone who can help." Lily shook her head. "We both make it. I'm not losing anyone else." Footsteps closed in. Lily glanced at Sandy, then at the gun in her hand. Another shot. Bark exploded beside her. They were out of time. Sandy looked at her and whispered, "Now." And Lily did something she had never done before. She charged toward the gunfire, yelling, flinging a rock, drawing them away from Sandy. She zigzagged, heart pounding, mud splashing up her legs. A beam caught her. A shadow lunged, and everything went black. The darkness wasn't empty. It pulsed, like a heartbeat underwater, dull, slow, heavy. Then came the voices, muffled at first, like someone shouting from behind glass. "She's just a kid. She's the reason we're exposed." "What about Harper?" "Gone. For now. Focus on the girl." Lily's eyes flickered open. Blinding white lights. A buzzing sound. Her arms were tied down. Her wrists ached. Her head pounded. She wasn't in the forest anymore. She was strapped to a metal chair in a cold, windowless room. The walls were gray. There was a vent in the ceiling. A camera in the corner blinked red. Then the door opened, and Kyle Mercer walked in. Alive. Breathing. Smiling. He looked the same as he had in the surveillance footage. Strong jaw, trimmed beard, 2 clean shoes. But there was something different in his eyes now. Cold. Hollow. Like a man who had traded his soul for a paycheck. Lily sat up straight. "You're supposed to be dead." Mercer chuckled and sat across from her, leaning forward on the table like this was some casual chat. "Let's just say reports of my death were greatly exaggerated." She stared him down, jaw tight. "You framed my dad." He tilted his head. "No, Lily. Your father framed himself. When he stuck his nose where it didn't belong. When he said no. You set him up." Mercer leaned back, folding his arms. "Your dad had a choice. Everyone does. He could have joined us. He could have protected you. But he was stubborn. Believed in truth. Thought he could beat the system." He smirked. "No one beats the system." Lily's voice was ice. "Then why am I still here?" Mercer stood. Walked behind her. "Because you're useful. Smart. Driven. You care. People like that are rare. We've been watching you for years." Lily's heart dropped. He leaned close to her ear. "You could do great things, Lily. With the right training. The right guidance." She yanked against the straps. "You kidnapped me." He straightened. "No. We're offering you something. A chance to matter. A chance to join the winning side." "I'd rather die." Mercer looked at her, deadpan. "That can be arranged." He walked toward the door, then paused. "We'll let you think it over. Not forever, though. Clock's ticking." He left. The door slammed. Lily sat alone in the silence, trying to stay calm. Think. Her wrist strap was slightly loose. Just slightly. She breathed slow. Focused. Tested it. It moved, just a little. She had time. Not much, but enough. And she wasn't going to sit there and rot. Not while her dad was still counting down the final days of his life. Not while Sandy was out there. Maybe alive, maybe not. Not while the truth still burned in her pocket. The flash drive gone. Taken. But she still had something they didn't know about. She'd memorized one of the names on the list. A name scratched into her mind like fire. Nolan Bishop. It had been next to a note. Key asset. Backdoor access. Program author. She didn't know who he was. But she was going to find him. And he was going to help her tear this whole thing down. Back in Norton Pines, the cabin still smoked. Sandy Harper lay flat under a tarp. Mud streaked across her face, barely breathing. She had taken a bullet to the shoulder. Her phone was gone. Her car, gone. But her mind was still sharp. And she knew where she had to go. There was one person she hadn't called in years. One person she swore she'd never ask for help. But if Lily was gone, if the girl was really taken, then she needed backup. She dragged herself out from under the tarp, gritting her teeth, and stumbled toward the woods. Toward a man named Jared Quinn. Former NSA. Disgraced. Dangerous. And exactly the kind of man you called when everything was falling apart. Meanwhile, in a tiny prison cell, Daniel Reed stared at the ceiling. 4 days left. That's what the guards told him this morning. 4. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop thinking about Lily. The last time he saw her, she had fire in her eyes. Now, all he could do was wonder if she was okay. If she'd moved on. If she hated him. Then, late that night, a folded paper was slipped under his cell door. No name. Just 5 words, printed neatly. Your daughter is still fighting. He picked it up slowly. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He wasn't alone, and neither was she. Back in the gray facility, Lily made her move. She twisted her wrist just enough, slowly, carefully, until the strap gave way. Then her other wrist. She stood, quiet, steady. She pressed her ear to the door. Silence. She grabbed the metal chair and slammed it once against the floor, loud. Then ducked behind the door. Footsteps rushed toward her room. The lock clicked. The door swung open, and Lily attacked. She bashed the man with the chair, grabbed his stun baton, and ran. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. She sprinted through the hallway, ducking past guards, sliding under gates, weaving through metal corridors. She had one goal now. Find Nolan Bishop, and then burn it all down. Rain hammered the rooftop of a dusty cabin in the Rockies where Jared Quinn sat sharpening a blade he no longer needed. His left arm, tattooed with encrypted coordinates, flexed as he worked. Outside, the forest groaned beneath the wind. Inside, silence ruled, until a knock split the quiet like thunder. Jared didn't flinch. He just set down the blade, stood slowly, and walked to the door. He opened it and stared. There, blood on her jacket, clutching her shoulder and swaying on her feet, stood Sandy Harper. "Didn't think you'd ever come crawling back," Jared said, his voice low and calm. Sandy gave a half-smile. "Didn't crawl. Walked. Got shot halfway here. But hey, classic me." Jared stepped aside. "You're bleeding on my porch." She stumbled in and collapsed onto the worn couch. Still nicer than a bullet to the lung. Jared grabbed a first aid kit from under a floorboard. As he stitched her up, she gave him the short version. Lily, the files, the fake death, the framing. By the end of it, Jared had stopped stitching. "You're telling me," he said, "there's a shadow program operating out of a ghost project called Mayfield. They faked a cop's death, framed a mechanic, and kidnapped a 16-year-old girl. And you thought I was the one with drama?" Sandy smirked. "Still sharp, huh?" Jared's face turned serious. "If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with something bigger than corruption. This is black budget, deep web, erase you from history-level stuff." "We need to find Lily," Sandy said. "They have her." Jared leaned back. "I'll find her. But we're going to war." Inside the facility, Lily ran like her life depended on it, because it did. Sirens howled. Red lights painted the walls like blood. Every door she passed was locked, sealed, bolted. Except one. She ducked inside an office lined with computer monitors and a wall of whiteboards covered in numbers, dates, and faces. One name kept repeating. Nolan Bishop. And there, on a screen, was a blinking dot. A tracker. She clicked it. Location, Boulder, Colorado. Nolan was off-grid. Underground. But someone had eyes on him. She didn't have much time. Footsteps pounded past the door. She yanked a cable from the computer, pulled a flash drive from a locked drawer marked Asset Archive, and stuffed it into her hoodie pocket. Then she climbed into the ceiling vent. The last place they'd think to look. She crawled, inch by inch, as voices shouted below. And by the time they realized the room was empty, Lily Reed was already gone. The next day, in a small apartment over a bookstore in Boulder, a thin man with uncombed hair and shaking hands poured his third cup of black coffee. He wore thick glasses, 2 different socks, and muttered to himself constantly. This was Nolan Bishop, once a genius programmer for the government, now a ghost hiding in plain sight. He hadn't left his apartment in 142 days. Food deliveries, burner phones, always watching, always waiting. So when his buzzer rang, he froze. No one ever rang. He checked his cameras. Static. Paranoia surged. Then a knock. He drew a pistol from under his keyboard. "Who is it?" A girl's voice replied, soft but clear. "My name is Lily Reed. You helped create something called Mayfield. I need you." Dead silence. Then Nolan opened the door. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You're the mechanic's daughter." Lily stepped in, exhausted, dirty, trembling. "I escaped. But they're hunting me. And I need to know everything you know. Right now." Nolan locked the door, pulled all the curtains, and activated a white noise machine. Then he whispered, "You're already dead. You know that?" "I don't care," she said. "I'm not leaving without answers." Nolan poured her some tea with shaky hands. Mayfield was never supposed to exist. It started as predictive behavior analysis, find threats before they became threats. But then the funding changed. The names changed. It stopped being about protection. He walked to a board and tapped a photo of Mercer. He was one of ours. Field operator. Trained to disappear. To become the lie. Lily's heart dropped. He was ordered to fake his death. Nolan nodded. And your dad was a test case. To see if public trust could be shattered without pushback. Frame a good man. See if the town turns on him. They did, Lily whispered. They really did. Nolan showed her a file on screen. He had backdoor access to several systems. I've been watching for years, he said. Waiting for someone like you to find the cracks. Lily stood. Then help me blow them open. Nolan hesitated. If I do this, I can't go back to hiding. I'll be hunted again. So will I, she said. But my dad dies in 3 days. If we wait, it's over. Nolan stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Okay. Far away, in a secret war room, Kyle Mercer smashed a monitor against the wall. She's with Bishop, an agent said, nervously. They made contact. Mercer paced like a caged animal. We underestimated her. Do we deploy full response? Mercer stopped. No. He turned to the screen, where Daniel Reed sat in his prison cell. We bring her to us. He pulled out a phone and made a call to the governor's office. That night, a broadcast aired nationwide. A special report. Due to a failed appeal and lack of new admissible evidence, the execution of Daniel Reed has been moved up. 48 hours. Lily stared at the screen, and something inside her broke. No more hiding, she said. Nolan looked up. What are you going to do? Lily's voice was calm. I'm going to show the world the truth. All of it. Nolan nodded. Then we'd better crash some servers. Sandy Harper, arm in a sling, stepped out of Jared's truck with a phone in hand. She had intercepted the broadcast. She played the clip. Jared's knuckles turned white. 48 hours, she said. Jared looked at her. We hit them before then. We go public. Hack everything. Crash the systems. Won't work, Sandy said. They'll spin it. Call it fake. They always do. Jared narrowed his eyes. Then we hit them somewhere bigger. Somewhere they can't control. Sandy paused and slowly grinned. I know just the place. The next morning, the servers at the State Justice Department went dark. Every news station across the country received anonymous emails. Every inbox had the same subject line. The Daniel Reed Files. America, you need to see this. Inside, documents, videos, voice recordings, including Mercer's meeting with Daniel, the list of targets, the orders to fake his death, and one last video. Lily Reed, staring directly into the camera. My name is Lily Reed. I'm 16 years old, and everything you've been told is a lie. The video spread like wildfire. Then came the protests. The courthouse was flooded with people, hundreds, then thousands. Signs, chants, rage. Inside, officials scrambled. And Kyle Mercer? He stood in the shadows behind tinted glass, watching it all unfold. His phone rang. The voice on the other end was low. They know. Mercer answered coldly. Then it's time we make her disappear for real. He turned to his team. Find Lily Reed. No more second chances. And outside, as the sun rose on day 47, Lily was already one step ahead. The sky over Denver was gray as ash. Storm clouds rolled in, but the city pulsed with something louder than thunder, truth. Screens across downtown lit up with Lily's face. News vans crowded the courthouse. Protesters lined the streets, some holding signs that read, Free Daniel Reed, others simply shouting his name. Inside a shuttered newsroom, Lily stood with Nolan and Sandy, who had rejoined them with Jared Quinn by her side. They had turned the old building into a war room. Wires tangled like vines, computers on every desk, caffeine-fueled determination in the air. But Lily didn't feel victorious. Not yet, because her dad was still locked behind bars, and he had 40 hours left. Nolan clicked away at his laptop, his hands jittery, but his eyes sharp. They've activated countermeasures. Cybersecurity is locking down fast. We have maybe one more shot at full exposure. Lily paced. Where? Jared pulled out a map and pointed. Capitol Square. Big rally scheduled for tomorrow night. Media, public, cameras. No one can stop a live feed once it goes up. Sandy cracked her knuckles. Then we go live. Truth in the open. Let the world decide. But they won't just sit back and watch, Nolan warned. Mercer will come. He'll try to shut us down. You're the most valuable piece on the board, Lily. Lily nodded. Then we end the game. That night, Daniel Reed was moved to death watch. The final holding cell before execution. Cold walls. No windows. Just a single cot and a light that never turned off. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, remembering the way Lily used to fall asleep in his lap during movie nights. The way she danced in the rain at age 9. The way she screamed when he taught her how to drive, and she almost hit the mailbox. He smiled through the ache. Then came a soft knock on the metal slot. A whisper from the other side. She's not done yet. Daniel sat up, heart thudding. And for the first time in days, he felt hope. At sunrise, Lily stood on the rooftop of the newsroom, watching the crowd form downtown. Signs. Marching feet. Chants echoing like drums of war. She took a deep breath and turned to her team. Tonight, we tell everything. The Mayfield Project. The lies. The fake death. The list. My dad. Jared loaded gear into backpacks. We'll get you in. Set up the uplink. Nolan will monitor the stream from here. Sandy pulled out a small black phone. I've got media contacts ready. If we do this right, it goes viral in seconds. Lily looked at Nolan. Can they trace it? He hesitated. Eventually. But not fast enough to stop it going live. Lily nodded. That's all we need. Then she turned to the monitor and pressed record. This is Lily Reed. Tonight at 8 p.m., I'm going live with everything they never wanted you to see. If you believe in truth, in justice, in family, tune in and stand with us. She posted the clip, and the internet exploded. Across town, Kyle Mercer stared at his phone, jaw tight. Do it now, he said into his earpiece. His agent responded, which one? All of them. Take down the feed, destroy the source, and if you get a clean shot, take the girl. At 7:32 p.m., the team arrived at Capitol Square. Thousands were there. People holding phones, live streaming. Giant screens were set up. The media scrambled, sensing history. Lily wore a black hoodie, her dad's old dog tags around her neck. Her eyes were calm, but her hands shook as she helped set up the camera. Jared plugged in the uplink. 5 minutes, and we go live. Sandy scanned the crowd. No sign of Mercer yet, but I guarantee he's here. They didn't have long. Lily stepped onto the makeshift stage. Microphone ready. Nolan's voice crackled in her earpiece. Everything's up. We're live in 3, 2, 1. She began. My name is Lily Reed. I am 16 years old. My father, Daniel Reed, is scheduled to die in less than 2 days for a crime he did not commit. She told it all. The Mayfield Project. The surveillance. The frame-up. Mercer. Everything. The crowd grew silent, leaning in. Some cried. Some shouted. Some held hands. Then Lily held up a photo. Mercer, alive, smiling, shaking hands with the men who paid him to vanish. This is the man whose death they blamed on my father. He's alive. Hidden. Protected. Because the truth scared them more than the lie. Suddenly, gunshot. The microphone sparked. Screams. Chaos. Jared shoved Lily behind a speaker as another shot rang out. Sniper, he yelled. People scattered. Sandy fired into the air. Police swarmed in, some real, some not. Lily crawled to the front of the stage, bleeding from her shoulder, grazed, not hit deep. She pulled the mic wire, connected it to the backup feed Nolan had prepared, and with blood dripping down her arm, she whispered into the mic. Don't let them bury the truth. Then she hit send, and the full file uploaded live, to every major news outlet, to every phone, to the whole world. Unstoppable. An hour later, Kyle Mercer was arrested trying to flee the state. The footage showed him laughing with crime bosses, taking money, giving orders. His face was on every screen in the country. The governor ordered a full halt to Daniel Reed's execution. The state Supreme Court called an emergency review, and at 4:17 a.m., Daniel was pulled from his cell. He didn't understand what was happening until he stepped outside and saw Lily standing there, bandaged arm, tears in her eyes. Hey, Dad, she said. He fell to his knees. She ran into his arms. And for a long, long time, neither of them said a word. Because they didn't have to. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because as the sun rose on the city, a phone rang in a hidden office. A voice said, Mercer fell. But the program lives. And a shadowed figure replied. Then find the girl. The morning news called her a hero. Lily Reed saves innocent father from death penalty. Teen hacker exposes government conspiracy. The girl who took down the system. But Lily didn't feel like a hero. She sat in a hospital room beside her father, Daniel, watching the sunrise spill gold across the windowsill. His hand was warm in hers, but his eyes were tired. The kind of tired that goes deeper than sleep. I thought I was never going to see you again, Daniel whispered. Lily swallowed hard. Me too. He smiled, weak but full of pride. You saved me. Lily shook her head. I didn't save you, Dad. You saved yourself. I just told the truth. No, Daniel said, squeezing her hand. You fought for the truth. That's different. And much harder. A nurse stepped in and smiled gently. Sorry, sweetie, visiting hours are over. Lily stood reluctantly. Rest, she said. I'll be back soon. As she turned to leave, Daniel said one last thing. Whatever's still coming, don't fight it alone. She nodded. But deep down, she already knew. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. In a facility hidden beneath the Nevada desert, far from news cameras and public outcry, 6 men sat around a glass table. One wore a military uniform with no name tag. One wore a senator's pin. One wore a priest's collar. All of them had blood on their hands. Mercer talked. The senator said, slamming his palm down. He cracked. That girl put everything at risk. She's just a teenager, another growled. She's a threat, the priest said softly. And threats must be neutralized. The man at the head of the table cleared his throat. Mayfield wasn't just about one operation, he said. It was a model, a proof of concept. Now the world is watching. The priest asked, what do we do? The leader looked at a dossier-marked subject, Lily Reed, and smiled coldly. We moved to Phase 2. Back in Denver, Sandy Harper stood on the steps of the courthouse, facing a sea of cameras. The system failed Daniel Reed, she said, voice strong, and it nearly buried the truth. But now, we are demanding full investigations into Mayfield, into all secret operations. We will not stop until every corrupt hand is exposed. Applause rose from the crowd. Behind her, Jared Quinn whispered into a phone. Yeah, I see movement. Tail's back. She's being followed again. He turned to Lily. They're not giving up. Lily nodded. Neither are we. They met Nolan at a safe house, an old church wired with more servers than pews. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Something's wrong, Nolan said. Ever since the upload, I've been getting pinged from ghost IPs. Not just government. Private networks. Military. Shadow groups. They're digging into everything. My files, your school records, even hospital security cams. Sandy crossed her arms. They're building a profile. Trying to find a weakness. They won't, Lily said firmly. But inside, she was afraid. Because she did have a weakness. Her dad. And they knew it. That night, Lily returned to the hospital with Jarrett. Daniel was asleep, hooked up, breathing steady. But something felt off. The nurse at the desk wouldn't look Lily in the eye. And Daniel's door was slightly ajar. Jared signaled with a flick of his fingers. Lily tensed. They pushed the door open slowly. And froze. The window was open. The bed empty. Daniel was gone. Chaos. Lily ran through the halls, screaming his name. Doctors denied moving him. No paperwork. No transfers. Security footage? Wiped. She grabbed a guard by the collar. Where is he? He stammered. I don't know. He was here an hour ago. Jared grabbed Lily's arm and pulled her back. They took him. Again. Lily's mind spun. Why now? Why not just let him go? Nolan's voice came through the earpiece. Because they want leverage. They knew Phase 1 failed. So now they're trying to rewrite the script. Lily's knees buckled. They had her dad again. But this time, she wasn't going to wait for the law to save him. She was going to burn down every door they tried to hide behind. Hours later, back at the safe house, Lily stood staring at a wall of red string and maps. Where would they take him? She asked. Not a normal prison. Not a public facility. Jared pointed at a circle on the map. There. Black site. Off books. Known only to deep-level ops. But getting in is suicide. Lily looked him dead in the eyes. Good thing we're not planning to survive. Across the country, inside a dark bunker lit by humming monitors, Daniel Reed sat, chained to a chair once again. A man in a tailored suit circled him like a vulture. You should have stayed silent, Mr. Reed, the man said. This would have all passed. Daniel's eyes burned with fire. You made a mistake. You came after my daughter. The man leaned in. Oh, we're not done with her yet. Daniel lunged against the chains, face twisted in rage. The man smiled. But first, he said, you're going to tell us everything she knows. Daniel spat at his feet, and the man's smile vanished. Very well. He walked to the door. Bring in the serum. Two soldiers entered with a case. Daniel's heart pounded, not because he was afraid for himself, but because he knew exactly what they were going to do. They were going to find Lily, and they were going to use him to do it. Back at the safe house, Nolan's computer dinged. He stared at the screen, pale. "What is it?" Lily asked. Nolan swallowed. "They've activated something called Reclamation Protocol. It's a trace program, alive, aggressive, designed to wipe every trace of you from existence. Social, financial, digital, everything." Sandy stiffened. "They're erasing her life." Lily stepped closer. "What happens if it finishes?" Nolan looked at her, somber. "You'll be a ghost. Legally dead. No records. No name. No protection." Jared loaded a magazine into a rifle. "Then we'd better stop it before it starts." Lily nodded, jaw tight. "They took my father," she said. Again. She picked up a USB drive, slid it into her hoodie. "This time, we take them all down." And as the night stretched into a storm, the war for truth was far from over. The rain was unrelenting, slashing sideways across the windshield as the van barreled down a narrow service road. Lily sat in the back, dressed in black tactical gear, flanked by Sandy, Jared, and Nolan, each locked in their own silent war. "ETA 4 minutes, Jared said from the driver's seat, eyes locked on the GPS tracker Nolan had rigged to ping Daniel's biometric signal. They had found the black site. It was hidden beneath an old communications hub deep in the Colorado mountains. Officially shut down years ago. Privately, it had become one of the government's deepest secrets. Now it held Daniel Reed. And Lily was about to walk into the lion's den. Nolan turned in his seat, his face pale. "Once we're in, I'll keep the systems down for 10 minutes max. That's all the time I can buy before they realize they're being ghosted." Sandy checked her weapon. 10 minutes is all we need." Lily's hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. From focus. She looked up at the mirror. "How many guards?" "Unknown," Jared said. "But it's not a prison. It's a lab. Intel says they use private defense, ex-military, off-books. No names. No mercy." Lily nodded. "Then let's be ghosts too." They parked in the shadows of the tree-line. From a distance, the hub looked abandoned. Rusted fences, crumbling satellite dishes, ivy creeping across broken windows. But the guards weren't far. Thermal scans showed 6 on the perimeter, possibly more inside. Jared and Sandy split left to draw attention. Nolan and Lily moved toward the side entrance. As they approached, Nolan pulled a small black cube from his bag and tossed it near the door. It let out a high-pitched buzz, then clicked. "EMP disabled the camera grid for 90 seconds, he whispered. "Go." Lily slid in first, heart pounding. The hallway was dimly lit, lined with peeling paint and flickering emergency lights. Somewhere beneath their feet, her father was being held, again. But this time, she wasn't a girl with questions. She was a weapon loaded with answers. Down in the sublevels, Daniel sat strapped to a gurney under bright lights. A scientist hovered beside him, prepping a syringe filled with a glowing serum. 2 guards flanked the door. The man in the tailored suit returned, slipping on gloves. "This will hurt," he said, "but it'll be worth it." Daniel didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the ceiling, replaying the memory of Lily as a little girl, dressed as a superhero with a blanket cape, saying, "Don't worry, Daddy. I'll always save you." He whispered it to himself now. "I believe you, Bug." The door slammed open. A guard flew backward. Smoke flooded in. And through it, like something out of a dream, Lily appeared. "Get away from my dad." She moved fast. Taser to the first guard. Roundhouse to the second. Sandy stormed in behind her, covering with precise shots. Jared followed, clearing the hallway. Daniel blinked in disbelief. "Lily." She dropped beside him, cutting the restraints. "I told you I'd come back." Daniel gripped her hand. "You're bleeding again." She grinned. "You should see the other guy." The building rumbled. An alarm blared. Nolan's voice came through their earpieces. "We've got a problem. Backup en route. Blackhawk inbound." And the system's self-sealing in 90 seconds. "Extraction now," Jared barked. They raced out the back corridor, Daniel limping with Sandy's support. Lily and Jared cleared the path, while Nolan opened every locked door ahead. Then, boom. An explosion rocked the hallway behind them. They didn't look back. They emerged into the forest just as the whirring sound of a chopper cut through the trees. "Move!" Jared yelled. They dove into the van. The engine roared. And they were gone. Hours later, Daniel sat wrapped in a blanket inside the safe house, sipping warm tea, watching Lily pace. You could have been killed, he said quietly. So could you. He nodded, looking at her, really looking. You're not the same girl who used to build tree houses out of junkyard wood. Lily stopped pacing. No, she said. I'm not. They made sure of that. Nolan entered the room, pale and wide-eyed. I decrypted a new part of the Mayfield archive, he said. This wasn't just about Daniel, or Mercer, or even the cover-up. He dropped a flash drive onto the table. This was about Phase 2. Sandy leaned in. What's Phase 2? Nolan looked at Lily. Total citizen profiling. Full behavioral tracking. Using school records, medical files, even social media, to predict and eliminate threats before they act. Jared frowned. Like Minority Report. No, Lily said. Like thought policing. Nolan nodded grimly. And it's not just a theory. They're already testing it. He opened a video file. A classroom. Children. One little boy flagged in red text. Disposition, aggressive. Risk level high. Parental notification, suppressed. The child was escorted from school in silence. No one ever saw him again. Lily's fists clenched. They're building a future without freedom. Sandy growled. Then let's take it back. Later that night, the group sat around a table. Lily stood at the head, the flash drive in hand. This is our final card, she said. The original design of Mayfield. Names. Faces. Funders. It all ends here. Jared looked up. You realize they'll come harder now. Burn cities if they have to. Lily nodded. They tried to erase me, she said. Erase my dad. Rewrite reality. She looked at them all, each worn, battle-scarred, tired. But we're still here. Sandy raised her cup. To truth. Nolan added. To resistance. Jared. To war. Daniel. To coming home. And Lily? She simply said. To the end of Mayfield. As she clicked the mouse. And the entire world began to see what power had tried so desperately to hide. In a darkened chamber beneath D.C., a new figure stepped forward. A woman with eyes like steel and a badge that read only, Director. Lily Reed has gone too far, she said. The others bowed their heads. And the director gave a final command. Bring me the girl. The video drop shattered the internet. News stations around the globe scrambled to keep up. Hashtags exploded. Journalists flooded timelines with leaks from the Mayfield archives. Politicians denied involvement. School districts demanded answers. Protests broke out in cities across America. Students, teachers, parents, everyday citizens, all chanting the same name. Lily Reed. Lily Reed. But Lily wasn't watching the news. She was in a basement in a safe house on the outskirts of Kansas, laying out the final phase of their plan. Around her, Jared loaded weapons. Sandy mapped out city access points. Nolan tapped rapidly on his keyboard, decrypting the last fragments of the Mayfield database. Daniel, still recovering from his time in the black site, watched quietly. You've become the voice of the whole country, he said softly. Lily didn't turn. I didn't ask for that. But you earned it. She tightened her grip on a folder labeled, Target, Director. Nolan looked up. We found her. Silence fell. Name's Evelyn Shaw, he continued. Former NSA. Architect of Mayfield Phase 2. Promoted to Director of National Threat Management under a fake identity. Jared raised an eyebrow. That's not even a real agency. Exactly, Nolan said. It's a shadow division with power to override federal courts. They've been creating digital kill switches, backdoors into banking, school, hospital records. If someone becomes unstable, they can erase their life with a single command. Lily's face hardened. So they don't just erase people. They erase potential, Sandy added. And if Shaw finds you, she won't stop at digital erasure this time. She'll put you in the ground. Lily zipped up her bag. Then we find her first. Across the country, inside a high-security government facility disguised as a think tank, Evelyn Shaw watched the Lily Reed footage in silence. She was calm, impossibly calm. Her suit was immaculate, her hair sharp, her eyes unreadable. One of her agents entered nervously. Ma'am, the leaks triggered a multinational inquiry. Half of Congress is demanding an investigation into Mayfield. Your name came up on a leaked funding record. She didn't blink. The agent continued. Local jurisdictions are starting to rebel. Some are halting data sharing. Even the FBI is freezing certain programs. Lily Reed is not finished, Shaw said flatly. She stood and walked to the digital wall behind her. A grid of surveillance feeds showed major cities, protests, newsrooms, and one blinking red dot. Lily Reed's location. She has done more than damage us, Shaw said. She has made us vulnerable. That cannot continue. The agent swallowed. Should I issue a red flag? Shaw smiled faintly. No, I'll do it myself. At 2:47 a.m., a private message appeared on every phone, screen, and feed Lily's team had ever used. One life for a nation's secrets. Come alone. 24 hours. Or Daniel Reed disappears again. Attached was a photo. Daniel, back inside a blacksite cell. Bound. Bruised. His eyes locked on the camera, tired but defiant. Lily's chest turned to ice. They had taken him again. No, Jared said, backing away. That's impossible. We got him out. Nolan's face went pale. Unless. They cloned the signals, Sandy growled. What we rescued wasn't the real black site. It was a shell. A decoy. Lily stared at the screen. Her reflection warped in the glass. They played us. She turned away, pacing. Her fists clenched. Nolan whispered. If you go alone, they'll kill you. If I don't, she replied, they'll kill him. Daniel's voice echoed in her mind. Don't fight it alone. She looked at each of them. I won't. She opened a dusty box from beneath the table. Inside, her dad's old toolbox. Covered in grease, filled with tools, wires, gadgets. Things they'd used to build tree houses and repair junkyard radios. Now they were going to use it to break into the most secure facility in the country. 23 hours later, the team stood on a cliff overlooking an underground base built into the side of a mountain in Utah. The entrance was disguised as a mine shaft, heavily guarded. No road in, no air access, just a tunnel wired with motion sensors, thermal cameras, and biometric locks. Easy, Sandy said. Only the most impenetrable place in America. Lily checked her harness. So we punch a hole. Jared pointed to a storm drain. That leads into a maintenance corridor. Security's lower there. But it's one way. No going back. Then we don't go back, Lily said. They dropped into the drain one by one, Nolan's custom jammer blocking the security nodes as they passed. Inside, the walls pulsed with humming electricity. The temperature dropped. Concrete corridors stretched like veins into the dark. Lily moved first. They passed abandoned rooms, some filled with lab equipment, others with servers still whirring. Then Nolan stopped. Wait. He held up his tablet. There. He pointed to a live camera feed. Daniel, real this time. Hooked up to a monitoring system, bruises fresh, heart rate steady. Next to him stood Evelyn Shaw. She was waiting. Sandy whispered, We're close. Jared handed Lily a small flash drive. This is everything. Final leak. Drop it if you don't come back. Lily nodded. Time to finish this. Inside the interrogation room, Evelyn Shaw waited as the steel door opened. Lily entered alone, unarmed. At least, that's what Shaw thought. You came, Shaw said, smiling like a schoolteacher welcoming a student. I knew you would. Lily didn't sit. Where's my father? He's alive. For now. Lily held out her hand. Let him go. And I disappear. No more leaks. No more resistance. Shaw tilted her head. You think you matter that much? I know I do. Shaw circled her. You could have joined us. You have the mind for it. The fire. We would have made you powerful. I don't want power, Lily said. I want people to stop being afraid. Shaw's face hardened. You've caused irreparable damage, Lily. Chaos. The public doesn't need the truth. They need control. Order. You mean silence, Lily spat. Then everything happened fast. Jared and Sandy burst through the ceiling grate. Nolan hacked the locks. Daniel's cuffs dropped. Shaw reached for her weapon. Lily tackled her. They crashed into a console, sparks flying. You think you're strong? Shaw hissed. You're just a child. Lily gritted her teeth. No. She shoved the flash drive into the mainframe. I'm the future. A blinding light filled the room. The leak triggered. Files. Videos. Names. Sent to every major news agency, every government oversight body, every human rights court. Mayfield was no longer a secret. It was evidence. Minutes later, they emerged into the daylight. Daniel limped beside Lily, arm around her shoulder. Helicopters appeared overhead. But they weren't black ops. They were press. The world had seen. And now, it was responding. That night, Evelyn Shaw was arrested. Daniel Reed was officially exonerated. And Lily? She was offered witness protection, a new name, a new life. She turned it down. Instead, she walked onto a stage in front of thousands, microphone in hand, and said one final thing. The truth belongs to the people, and I'll never stop fighting to protect it. Thunderous applause. Somewhere in the crowd, her father smiled. But far away, in a cold room untouched by justice, another terminal lit up. A message appeared on screen. Project Nightshade activated. And beneath it, target, read Lily. It was supposed to be over. Lily stood under the golden glow of morning light as the city buzzed with a strange, hopeful energy. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, people walked the streets with signs not of protest, but of victory. Headlines everywhere declared the same thing. Mayfield Project dismantled. Evelyn Shaw faces international charges. Lily Reed, hero or threat? That last one stung. Not because it wasn't fair, but because it wasn't wrong. After everything, she didn't feel like a hero. Heroes don't have nightmares about black site cells and fake funerals. Heroes don't memorize escape routes every time they enter a room. Lily Reed felt like a girl who had crawled through the cracks in the system and exposed its darkest secrets. But the shadows weren't done with her yet. 2 weeks had passed since the fall of Evelyn Shaw. Since the flash drive hit every courtroom and computer screen. Since Lily stood on the courthouse steps and promised the world she wasn't done fighting. She and her father were now living in a quiet town in Oregon, in a borrowed cabin tucked between evergreens. The plan was to lay low, heal, let the world move on. But Lily knew better. The world doesn't forget a storm. It just waits for the next one. That morning, Daniel was out fishing, finally starting to laugh again. Nolan was in D.C., testifying before Congress. Sandy and Jared had vanished off-grid after Shaw's arrest, though Jared had left Lily with a burner phone and one message. If anything feels off, run. And today it did. Because Lily had received a letter. No name, no address, just a folded sheet of paper that read, Nightshade is real. Trust no one. They're watching again. Inside was a photo, a blurry surveillance still, of her, taken that morning. From outside the cabin, she ran to the window. Nothing. No shadows. No movement. But her stomach twisted. She grabbed the burner phone. Dialed Jared. Voicemail. She tried Nolan. Straight to busy. She turned on her laptop. Logged into a secure network. Opened the archive they thought they'd emptied. And that's when she saw it. A file. New. Not uploaded by her, or Nolan, or Sandy. Just one line. Project Nightshade, Phase 1 active. Her eyes widened. Nightshade. The file attached was incomplete, heavily encrypted. But she cracked the first few layers. And what she saw chilled her blood. The file wasn't about her. It was about children. Dozens of names. Ages. Schools. Photos. Potential assets. Potential threats. The youngest was 6. One was only 4. Lily's heart raced. They started over. Then she saw the tag under her name. Original Catalyst. Not Target. Catalyst. They weren't just coming after her. They were using her. To scare parents. To justify new programs. To build something worse than Mayfield. And then the power went out. She grabbed her go bag, flash drives, burner phones, tracker disruptors, and was out the back door in seconds, sneakers slamming through the dirt trail behind the cabin. She made it 30 feet before she saw them. 2 figures in black. Standing perfectly still. Faces covered. Waiting. She turned. Another behind her. They hadn't come to talk. They came to a race. She bolted into the woods, branches tearing at her jacket. Her lungs burned. The shadows followed, silent, fast, trained. But Lily knew how to disappear. She dove into a ravine, curled behind a moss-covered log, heart hammering. One of the men passed within inches. She held her breath until he was gone. Then she pulled out the burner phone and texted Nolan. Nightshade is real. I'm exposed. Code black. Seconds later, her phone buzzed back. Run. They're inside the system. Safe House Protocol 3. Meet at the fork. She knew what that meant. The fork wasn't a place. It was a choice. The last resort meetup Nolan had programmed for if things ever went completely sideways. She had one shot. By nightfall, she was on a Greyhound bus under a false name, headed to Missouri. She wore sunglasses, a hoodie, and a fake ID she'd made herself. She didn't sleep. Didn't blink. At the next stop, a woman got on and took the seat across from her. Middle-aged. Friendly smile. Too friendly. Lily's hand slipped into her hoodie, fingers on the pepper spray in her pocket. The woman leaned in. "I'm not one of them," she whispered. "I'm with the resistance." Lily didn't respond. The woman handed her a folded card. "Nolan sent me. Show this at the fork." The woman stood up and got off at the next stop. Lily unfolded the card. Inside, a drawing of a flower with black petals and one word, "Nightshade." She stared at it for a long time, then tore it in half and tossed it out the window. She wasn't going to let them twist this story again. Not with kids. Not with lies. Not with fear. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a fresh flash drive. Labeled it, "Nightshade, Truth Unleashed." And then she wrote a message on the back of a napkin. The kind of message that would scare the right people. "You tried to erase me, but I became the blueprint. This time, I'm not just revealing the system. I'm dismantling it." The bus drove on into the night. Toward the fork. Toward war. The fork wasn't a building. It wasn't a bunker or a headquarters. It was a convergence. A literal fork in the road on a forgotten highway in rural Missouri, marked only by a rusted-out gas station and a flickering streetlight. No signs. No cameras. No noise, except for the steady whisper of wind across the cornfields. It was the perfect place for a revolution to begin. Lily arrived just after midnight, stepping off the Greyhound bus with nothing but a backpack, a flash drive, and fire in her eyes. She crossed the empty lot, found the old garage door behind the station, and knocked in the pattern she'd memorized long ago. 3 short. 2 long. 1 short. It slid open. Inside stood Nolan, eyes shadowed with exhaustion but alive with purpose. Beside him, Jared Quinn, gear-strapped and alert. Sandy Harper, arms still in a sling but face carved from stone. And Daniel Reed, her father. He opened his arms. She ran to him. They hugged like survivors do. Tight, silent, unbreakable. "You made it," he whispered. "They tried to stop me," Lily replied. "They should have tried harder." In the hours that followed, the safe house buzzed like a war room. Screens lit up with data, names, patterns, command structures. Nolan had cracked deeper into the Nightshade system, unearthing the truth that no one was supposed to ever see. Nightshade wasn't new. It had been born out of the ashes of Mayfield. A hydra, cut off one head, 2 more took its place. Worse, it was backed by a coalition of private defense firms, AI developers, and rogue intelligence units from multiple countries. It had no name on paper, no budget line, no oversight. It existed in whispers, algorithms, and fear. And at the center of it, children, not just profiled, conditioned. Lily read the report aloud, her voice steady despite the horror. "They've started trials in low-income districts. Quiet manipulations through online learning programs, coded reinforcement systems. Reward compliance. Punish deviation. Model docile future citizens." Daniel's hands shook. "They're trying to control the next generation." "No," Lily said. "They're trying to replace it." Jared paced the room. "We can't leak it. Not like last time. If we go public too fast, they'll call it fake again. AI generated. Staged. They'll discredit everything." Sandy nodded. "We need the world to feel this one." Nolan clicked on a screen. "There's one way." He pulled up the coordinates of a location deep in the Rockies. Fort Thorne, a secure AI lab where the Nightshade central server was housed, buried under layers of steel, guarded by mercenaries, firewalled against the internet. "But it has a weakness," Nolan said. "A hidden uplink. Shaw's personal override protocol. I found it embedded in the source code before the archives went dark." "Meaning?" Daniel asked. "Meaning if we can get to it," Lily said, "we can wipe Nightshade completely. Every file, every node, every backup. And destroy the system," Jared added. "Permanently." They looked at one another. No illusions left. This was it. The end of the road. The beginning of freedom. The assault on Fort Thorne began at dawn. Not with guns, but with truth. Jared led a diversion team to the north perimeter. Nolan launched a cyber blitz on the firewall, forcing the system to divert power. Sandy drove a decoy van right through the checkpoint, triggering a lockdown. And Lily? Lily went in through the tunnels, just like she'd done before. Alone. Inside, alarms wailed. Lights flickered. Automated defenses sparked. But she moved with purpose, every step bringing her closer to the uplink terminal buried at the core of the server room. And waiting for her there was him. Not a soldier. Not a mercenary. A boy. No older than 12. Wide-eyed. Pale. wearing a headset wired directly into the server. She froze. He looked at her, confused. They told me I was helping, he said. Helping the world. Making people better. Lily slowly stepped forward, setting her backpack down. You're not a weapon, she said gently. You're a kid. You're you. He looked at the screen. I don't want to do this anymore. Then don't, she said. He nodded and pulled the headset off. Alarms went silent. The system opened. Lily sat at the terminal, breath held, flash drive in hand. This is for everyone they erased. She inserted it. A final override screen appeared. Warning, total system deletion initiated. Do you wish to proceed? Lily didn't blink. She pressed yes. The servers began to melt from the inside. 27 minutes later, Fort Thorn was empty. The boy was safe. The team was safe. And Nightshade? Gone. Wiped from existence. No backups. No escape protocols. No phoenix to rise from the ashes. The aftermath was swift. Headlines spread worldwide. Global AI control system exposed and destroyed. Lily Reed dismantles Nightshade operation. International leaders call for global oversight of surveillance programs. Elected officials were forced to resign. Secret projects were shut down. Families reunited. And children once marked by the system, were free to just be children. 3 months later, Lily stood under the same courthouse steps where she had once broadcast the truth to the world. She wore no armor, no hoodie, no flash drive, just a simple shirt, a voice, and a heart still burning. She stepped to the mic and faced a sea of people. Cameras. Silence. Then she said, I was never supposed to survive. I was supposed to be erased. Forgotten. But I'm still here. We all are. And this time, we remember. Thunderous applause. Her father watched from the crowd, eyes shining. And somewhere behind him, a new generation listened. Because Lily Reed wasn't just a girl who exposed a lie. She became the symbol of what happens when the world forgets to care. And one person decides to care anyway. Not with bullets. Not with fear. But with truth. The kind that can't be deleted. The kind that lives on. Forever.